A group of MSU alumni are making their mark in sound engineering and mixing in Hollywood, and they're garnering Emmy nominations and awards too. The group is affectionately known as the Audio Mafia. The common denominator is longtime MSU audio teacher Gary Reed, who's also Emeritus Director of Broadcasting and General Manager of WKAR Radio and Television. Andy Lang is up for 2 Emmys this year. Phil DeTolve and Gary McGregorian are up for 1 each for a total of 4 in January. Pat Ciccone won the Mafia's first Emmy almost 30 years ago and has played an important role in getting all these guys started in their careers in Los Angeles. Ciccone has been mixing all of Alexander Payne's films. Mike Ullman has won 3 Emmys with shows like 24, Desperate Housewives, and Discovery Channel's When Dinosaurs Ruled the Earth. Chris Foster is co-owner of a major music editing post house in LA and is nominated this year too. And Luke Schwartzwelder, the youngest alumnus, mixed the last Indiana Jones film, Ferrari, and West Side Story, essentially doing Steven Spielberg's work. Welcome, gentlemen. So what does it mean to be an audio or sound engineer or mixer? What do you do?
The work is kind of divided amongst a big team. It's not one person doing all the work. So someone doing the sound editorial will be making sure all the audio is in sync, making sure if there are alternate takes or ADR, that gets scheduled and recorded and placed in the timeline. There's also sound effects editorial where that person is actually putting in the sound effects. There's Foley editors, and those are the people that are taking the Foley that's been recorded on a Foley pit and then also making sure it's in sync with production and that type of work. And then once the editorial is finished, it goes to the mix process, and the mixer will take all the elements, get it in their session, and then it's basically just making a soundtrack that is smooth, it's impactful, it's dynamic, but most importantly, realizing the vision of the person sitting behind you. So, there's a great deal of learning to balance your ego and knowing that this is not your project. So even if I have a strong opinion on sound or a music cue or a dialogue line, you got to throw it all out the window and listen to the people behind you, because those are the ones that they're going to call you back to do more work if you jive well. And one thing that Reed told me back way back when is it's not the quality of the mix that makes a good mixer. It's having a good time with the people you're working with and making sure that everyone's at ease and everyone is taken care of. And because those are the experiences that the paying clients are going to remember. They can go to any place in town and get a fairly decent mix, but the people they want to work with and sit with for hours and hours at a time are the people that make them feel relaxed and make it a smooth process for everyone. So there's much more to mixing and editing and anything audio related. There's much more to it than just the tech side of it. There's definitely a interpersonal part of it, and being able to work with people, being able to work with egos. A lot of the times the producers or directors that we work with, they have their own ego, and so we need to respect and manage that. And I'm trying to learn every day. I'm trying to get myself 1% better every day. So it goes beyond just the sound aspect of things in our profession.
Yeah, so we're working on a film or TV show. The picture is going back and forth and back and forth, and by the time we've worked on a project, we've seen it 1,000+ times, and we mix in detail. Yes, you've got a room full of people. And, as Phil so eloquently said, mixing's just, part of it, maybe even just 20% of it. We're coaches, we're referees, we're psychologists, we're, peacemakers, we're, many things, just as a sound supervisor and just as a music editor. You've got to work well with the composer as a music editor. As the sound supervisor, you also have to work hand in hand with the director or the showrunner. and there's a lot of egos and a lot of management, if you will. So it goes beyond the definition of the occupation, if you will. And I think what all of the guys are saying here is, we all started off at rookies. We all have a story. We all started somewhere, but at some point, and what we all have in common is that we were blank slates. We were blank slates with a hunger for knowledge. And Gary, this is what we all have in common. It was Gary Reed who recognized that hunger and that desire and filled that blank slate with base knowledge that gave us all the opportunity to build careers and be recognized amongst our peers. So, just want to make sure that we go back to that as well, that's what we all have in common. We were all rookies at one point, but before then we were blank slates that Reed filled with information, and our education at Michigan State University also was invaluable. And quite frankly, and I think the guys, I think you'll also agree with me as well, it gives us a little bit of an edge, because I would say the majority of people that work in our industry don't have a college education. And I don't know what it is exactly. I can't say what it is exactly, but I've always felt that maybe I had a little bit of an edge because, I had a deeper education than just being trained how to do sound. So
I would totally agree with that. I mean, I remember when I was working at Sony, and we were in sound transfer or whatever, and bunch of people standing around wasting time on the clock, and somehow it came up in conversation about college and everything, and I thought everybody went to college, and I was like, oh yeah, I got my bachelor's at Michigan State, and everybody, like the whole room, turned around and looked at me, and they're like, what? And I found out I was the only person there who had a college degree, literally the only person who had a college degree. And I that was a shocker to me, and that kind of followed me, through my whole career. I was like, I would just kind of like, surreptitiously try to figure out, who had gone to college or whatever when you're talking about people's backgrounds. And it's true, man. That is one of the things, that helped us out most sure. But I want to tag on to what Patrick was saying is, yeah, we were all blank slates, but I think one of the greatest things that I ever learned was, as being a blank slate, Richard Branson years ago, started Virgin and all of that, billionaire. He once said, don't ever take a job because you don't know how to do it. Take it and then learn it as fast as you can. And that was the thing that, I kind of took to heart, especially getting into the entertainment business, because, you're a blank slate, and you're not going to walk in the door knowing all the answers to what, needs to be done. But I think I told this to Gary and probably Phil and Chris as well. One of the greatest lessons I ever learned in the entertainment business wasn't what to do. It was what not to do. Because pretty much anybody can walk in the door and, oh, you push this button and you do this, and the film goes around. Well, nobody uses film anymore. But anyhow, you do all this other stuff. And but it's really, what Chris was talking about, and Patrick as well, is, mixing is so much more. It's psychological, it's hand-holding, it's doing all that stuff. And what I learned early on from watching all of these other mixers who had been around for literally decades, especially at Sony, was just watching them and watching how they treated clients and how they treated, the directors and everybody else. And it's like, I could learn what they were doing, but it was far more important, like, oh, you don't do this as far as your relationships go, or with the client or whatever. And so when I actually was given the opportunity to jump into a mixing chair, I already had that. And that was like the great lesson right there was, you could make mistakes at the console, but if you treat somebody like garbage, or you mouth off to them, or whatever it is, you're not coming back to work with them. And that's just how it is. Because I'll tell you right now, like my first mixes that I ever did, man, don't rent those DVDs. They're like the worst things I've ever heard in my life. But the thing was clients really loved working with me. And so they were like, let's do our next series with you or whatever. And, you know, so over the course of 20 some years, you eventually get to a point where it's like, oh, okay, yeah, that turned out pretty okay. You know?
Well, yeah, you're spending a lot of time with clients, whether it's a movie or a TV show, especially a TV series, and they just have to like being around you. Not only, you know, your talent level is assumed to a certain degree, but you know, they got to like hanging around you.
Very true. Very true.
Yeah, and the flip side are, you know, sometimes like you work with like a client who's new, and we're seeing that a lot more right now, and that can be tough, especially if they're not quick at making decisions. And but you also get to decide, like, these young, like, new producers or showrunners or directors, they might go on to do a bunch of cool stuff, and if you make a great impression on them, you'll be their first call, you know. So you never know, your showrunner could just suddenly get a overall deal with Netflix, and then they could be hitting you up.
To add on to what Michael was saying, oftentimes on the day of the playback or the review, especially if I'm working on a show that's really fast turnaround, really high stress, you know, I'll sometimes have, you know, a room of 10 people come in, and sometimes they'll just be all frazzled and stressed and like, oh, it's like, oh, and they're like, so are you stressed as we are? And I'm always like, no, man, it's all good. Even if I am super stressed, like, the energy that the person in this chair gives off sets the tone of the room. And if you are showing the stress level that they're showing, it's not going to be a smooth session. There's doubt, there's like insecurity, there's mistrust. And even if things aren't super smooth, you kind of need to keep that facade of like, I got this, all going to be good. And by the time you leave here, everyone's going to be happy. It's going to be fun. It's all good. And if you give that kind of energy and that vibe up front, they kind of sit back with a breath of relief, and they know that it's going to be handled, you know. So energy and your ability to work with people, and like you're saying, like they're going to want to be around you and be around people that they enjoy being with, and it makes all the difference.
Phil, to echo that, like, and what Michael and Patrick are saying, and Andy, like, to me, that with mixing, as already been said, I would argue, like, what you actually know about, like, how to push a fader is like 5% of the job. And like, and that's why I'm so appreciative of the opportunity I got with Patrick to learn what a mix tech was. I had no idea. But I think it's more and more common these days with a lot of people that are more sound editors move to the mixing chair. And a lot of times they haven't had a lot of experience on the mix stage. Whereas as a mix tech, with like what Andy went through and what I went through with them, and just seeing the dynamic on the stage and how you deal with the clients and things, that's like the number one thing is just like they need to have confidence. Like, because the thing with the mix stage is it's not just the mix, like it's kind of the last, like that and the color timing, right? It's like the last two pieces of completing a project. So when a client comes, I mean, in fact, when I worked with Patrick and Andy, you know, I believe the director, he referred to the mix stage as the sanctuary, right? Because that's like the safe place. And so a lot of times when the directors are on the mix stage, you know, they love the mix process, not just because the movie's starting to come together, not just the edit, but the color timing and the sound mix and everything. You know, it's starting to look and feel like an actual film or a TV show or whatever. But it's also like the time away from all the noise. So they get off the email and off all the phones ringing all the time, and they're in this quiet spot with no windows, this dark room with, you know, 3, 4, 5, 10, 15, 20 people, whatever it is, you know, and you're sitting at the console. It's not because you know how to EQ, you know, a resonance out of a sound, because anyone can learn how to do that. It's just that they have the confidence that you're there and you're on their team. And I've been fortunate enough to hop onto some bigger projects as of recent. And the biggest thing that another mentor of mine told me is, it's like, look, the director just has to know that you're on his side. Like, you're not there to do what you want to the film. Like, you're paid to be there as an expert to help him fulfill his creative vision, right? Him or her, or whomever it is. Even with me, like, you know, I'm much more new to the mixing chair as a lot of you guys are on this call. But when I've had the opportunity with these directors, they all seem to love me for some reason, but probably because I'm just enthusiastic. I love it. And I'm a guitar player, so I don't mind. I love the attention. It's totally fine with me. but when I'm sitting there, I just want, they know that I'm there for them. So whatever they want, like, and I think the experience comes with knowing when to talk up, right? If you disagree with everything, then they're just going to think you're against them. But if you pick your battles and you choose the right moments in time, like we might do something that, you're sitting there knowing this is not going to work. This is just terrible. And the director's like, great, move on. And you just know in the back of your head, like, okay, maybe next week when we go back to this scene might be the time for me to, interject. And they might shoot it down. And if they do, that's fine, because it's not my movie, it's theirs. The older I get and the more people I meet, especially outside of the industry too, I don't think it's just with this job. I think any industry that anyone tries to pursue after their education, the biggest thing that's going to help you get places in life, to me, is just interpersonal skills, and just knowing, like, if you're in a service industry, which this is, you're not paid because you know how to use an EQ or a fader. Like, we're there because it's a service. We're there to serve, right? So no matter what, you just want to make the clients know that you're helping them with their project. So I think that's the huge thing that I had to learn. And once I have learned it, it's certainly helped.
It's all about relationships. And this is how you get clientele. This is how you get repeat clients. And it's about being personable and the type of personality that people want to be around. Absolutely.
One thing that I started doing a few years ago is, if I have a room full of 6, 8 people, at the end of the session, I just jot down like certain things that I talked about with each one, so that when they're back next week, we can pick up those conversations. Oh. And then over the course of 10 weeks or 13 weeks, whatever, however long you're working with them, you've actually already established a relationship with them just by catching up with what their kids are up to, or what their holiday plans were, or whatever. And it's super important not just to do that with the showrunner. I would do it with everyone from the AEs in the room to the showrunner, to, like, you try to make sure that you're connecting with everyone, because then the showrunner sees that you're connecting with everyone.
Oh, yeah. Even the PA or whoever.
Even the PA, everyone. And remembering people's names, like all the things that you learn, that seem obvious. For me personally, it's really hard to remember all the conversations I have with so many people over so many weeks or whatever. But then I also know when they come back next fall, oh, we were talking about this thing, and then I can be like, oh, so how's your kids' school? You guys went to blah blah blah, or, and so it automatically picks up that relationship without just being, so how's the show sound? You know what I mean? It gives you that edge that we're actually human beings. We're actually people. For a long time, I had this weird thing where, like, I was always like a subordinate to the people behind me, where they're the big shots in the, living in Laurel Canyon, and they're driving their Ferraris, and I'm in my, Camry that's dirty or whatever. There's like this, but at the end of the day, we're all people, and we're actually in the same room working on the same thing. And once I got over that, I had this breakthrough of being able to not be super intimidated by some of these people who have been working in the industry for 30, 40, 50 years or whatever. And it breaks down that kind of intimidating barrier. So that's something that I've been trying to really focus on as of late, is just really working on relationships. Because also, like you were saying earlier, is you never know 5 years from now who any one of those people are going to be directing a film, or going to be a showrunner or an executive at HBO, or whatever it is. And if they remember you, you're going to get a call back, and that's how it goes.
I think the thing we kind of didn't really touch on in why this is so important is, it's about getting the recurring business and building those relationships. But I think more importantly, at least for me, when I was actually mixing, was I wanted to be interested in these people's lives, and I wanted to have that relationship, because it's not a 9-to-5 job. When we go in the morning, whatever our call time is, and I would always tell people this, it's like, I knew what time I was going to start. I never knew what time I was going to finish. And, I could finish at 7:00 at night. I could finish at midnight. I can't tell you how many days I was there at 4 a.m., 5 a.m., 6 a.m., whatever it is. You do it until the job is done. And so if you're sitting in a room of people that either you don't want to be with or don't want to be with you because you haven't fostered that relationship, it's pretty much pure hell. And so it's really, I think, from a self-preservation mode, it's like, I want to be interested. I want to be vested in these people's lives because we're going to be here for 16 or 18 hours today. And so, yeah, exactly right, Chris. I don't want to just be, hey, how did that sound? Did you like that better? Did you like it over here the way it was before?
Yeah, Michael, I think it's even especially on projects that have extended hours, right? And get super crazy. The more you know the crew, like the more because it's an all for one thing, right? You're on the same team. Like you'll be working till midnight or later, and the PA is going to get you dinner. So, they're your best friend at that point when they bring the food back, and the editors and everyone. And so when you're with the same people for 7 days a week for 3, 4, 5 weeks or whatever it is, like the more you get to know them, the more fun it is, the more gratifying I think it is as well, because you have those memorable experiences, and you don't have the feeling of just slaving away at work for 7 days a week. You're going to work on something, create something great out of nothing, which is the beauty of what we do with
yeah. I mean,
crew of people.
I used to kind of tell people, they're like, well, what do you do for a living? And to get back to your original question, Russ, when you were asking, like, let's describe it for the listener. The best thing that I would tell people, the easiest way, and kind of flip, but at the same time it's really how I felt about it, was I got to go every day and sit in a big giant electronic sandbox and play with all of my best friends.
Yeah.
And that was work, man.
And let me just add one more thing, because you're all like 110% correct. No matter how bad the project is, no matter how you feel about the project, if you give it 100%, this is, as I used to say to all you guys at one point, this is the best project I'm working on today. So if you give it 100%, it's obvious, and they feel it, because from their point of view, this is the most important project ever. So if you give it your 100%, then they can feel that you're giving all of your effort into it. So that's an important equation as well.
Totally. Either the project's amazing and you're helping it become more amazing, or if it's not great, you're working with great people and you're trying to do what you can to make it as good as it can be.
Yeah. Well, like everyone's kind of said multiple times, is we're in a service industry, and there's a creative side to it and an artistic side to it. But at the same time, we're there to there's a vision of someone, and we're there to help kind of fulfill that. And we're asked for our opinions on sometimes, and we're asked to build things and make things, build design, or what would you do with the music in the scene. We have leeway to do that, but it's the time with the people and the connection with the people, and it's about making that connection with the viewer as well too. It's all part of it. So we're up for editorial for Dahmer, the Jeffrey Dahmer story on Netflix. We, like, of projects I've done for Ryan Murphy, they tend to be very sensationalized and kind of bigger than life. And this is a project that I actually haven't talked. I've had opportunities to talk about it, but I've had a hard time with actually discussing the creative artistic side of it, knowing that there are families that were, this brought back so much for these families. I feel like that, I know that a lot of families weren't happy with the show, but I feel like they did a very beautiful job with kind of shining a light on the victims. And I did of his shows, like they weren't glorifying anything, where sometimes they do tend to glorify the violence and the horrific actions, but it's so much of it is fictionalized. This wasn't. And I feel honored to have worked on the show, to have taken part of it. And it's a bittersweet thing for me. It's like I'm grateful that we were nominated for it, but of any of the nominations, this is one where I'm like, this doesn't matter. This doesn't matter to, like, it's the story and these people who are continuing with the struggles of one person's actions, this doesn't mean anything. You know, I'm grateful for it. I'm grateful for the recognition because of the team that I work with, that I had the opportunity to work with, from the mixers to the editors. Because while I'm a supervising sound editor, you know, I'm not doing the nitty gritty work. Like there's a dialogue editor and effects editor who's putting everything together, and I'm kind of like the point person between the producers and Ryan, the showrunner, and the mix team and the editors, and it's a whole team of people.
Yeah, one thing about that, as far as the sensitivity of content, I'm reminded of a show I mixed last year. I mixed a 4-part series called 11 Minutes, and it was about the music festival in Las Vegas and the shooting. And it was really, really difficult content. A lot of it was POV, cell phones, and security camera, and it was very real. And there was always the conversation of like, are we sensationalizing this, or are we telling a true story that isn't going to affect the victims' families, anyone attached to this project? How can we do it in a way that shows compassion and empathy, but is still true to what happened? So there was always kind of that in the background of making sure, like, you know, we didn't want a big boom or a big swell or like anything that would really make it more heavy than it already was, but still respecting the story that we're telling. And there've been a couple projects like that where it's, you know, you have to really tread lightly and make sure that what we're bringing to the table is honoring the vision of the showrunner or the creator, and knowing what stylistically is appropriate, you know, because we could have made that thing booms and pops and swells and made it, you know, whatever, but it's all about the story. It's all about how the story is being told and through what point of view you want to experience that story. And so I get it. I get what you're saying, Gary, especially when, you know, it's tough. It was tough to work on, tough content to watch. But sometimes these are stories that need to be told. And therein lies the challenge.
And it is, you know, because I think one of the things, especially again for the average viewer out there, that they don't realize necessarily is just how much we can use sound in the choices that are made in sound editorial, and especially in the choices that are made on the mix stage. How much of what we use as sound we use to manipulate the viewer. And so it's a very fine line, you know. Sometimes, I mean, I recall, you know, like not when this wasn't a reality situation like Dahmer or 11 Seconds was, but at the end of the very first season of 24, it was the first time, you know, if you ever watched the series, you know, it had a very, very definitive clock sound at the beginning of the act, in the middle of the act, and at the end. And at the end of the very first series, the very first year of it, there was we fought for two things on that. They had shot two endings, and we were all under an NDA for it, so we couldn't like discuss it outside. But they had shot two endings, and in one of the versions, Jack's wife, Terry, dies, and she dies in his arms. And they weren't sure if they were going to go with that because it was pretty raw. And at the same time, she dies in his arms, and then they bring up this big digital bam, 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 you know, clock on top of it. And I took the clock out. And when we did the playback, the director and the producers were all there, and they all just about fell out of their seats because we had done, you know, 24 of these episodes. And they're like, where's the clock, man? What are you guys doing? How is this final? And I was like, let it play without the clock. And we went back and forth, and, you know, and they were talking to each other about it, and they wanted me to put it back in. And I said, I'm going to stake my gig on this, because this is the one shot where you have drawn your audience in, you have let them sit with the emotion. Don't tell them what the emotion is. And it's the one thing, and every now and then I'll see little forums online or whatever, and it's the one thing that people talk about from that series is how they just were blown away because what they were expecting wasn't there, and they had to just sit with themselves and understand. And that's, I think, ultimately the power of sound, or in that case, the absence, or the power of the absence of sound. And it's one of the things as mixers that we have to be very, very cognizant of is, are we doing this to force an emotion, or are we doing this to support an emotion? And that comes into play over and over and over every day, all day long while you're on the mix stage.
It's learning the power of sound. The step one in our careers is we're learning how to make something sound good. So we're learning EQ, we're learning reverb, we're learning panning, we're learning how to make it sound good. And then the next step is learning how sound can tell a story. And sound is so crucial. All these guys will tell you how crucial sound is to tell the story. The next step that I found in my career was learning how sound can evoke emotion, how that we're able to subtract or add or draw attention to this or whatever it is that we're trying to move the story forward. Sound is crucial. And as a sound person, it's important that you learn this step. And then I will say at the twilight of my career, where I find myself now is step 4, you become a master, and you do all 3 of those first 3 things automatically by instinct. And then you stop thinking like a sound person. You start to think as a filmmaker. And this is what floats you, at that level. You're thinking like a filmmaker. Alexander Payne's movie Holdovers, he had a movie where Paul Giamatti's character, who's drunk getting ready for bed, has blink, 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 very cutesy music in there, kind of making light of the moment. And I said, Alexander, listen to this. He says, where's the music? And I said, exactly. He says, it makes the scene feel more raw, and it makes him a more pathetic character. I said, exactly. He said, I like it. Let's do it like that. So when you stop thinking like a sound person and start thinking as a storyteller, filmmaker, emotion evoker, then you reach that kind of that master level, if you will.
The ultimate compliment you could pay a music editor is that you have no idea what they actually did. It's like,
totally.
If I did a good job, I'm totally invisible. Like nothing I did should be noticed, like you shouldn't hear edits or hear things out of place. Like it should just sound like everything was how it was supposed to be, and they made a great movie and the composer did an awesome job. And like, what's a music editor? Like that means we did perfect, basically.
Well, those of us who know just how crucial and essential a good music editor is. Believe me, we all know this. Everyone in this this call.
I was just going to tack onto that it's being a music editor is a really difficult job because you're serving 2 masters, and it's like you've got to you've got to serve the vision of the director or producer, showrunner, if you're working on television. But at the same time, you can't throw the composer under the bus and destroy what, their vision for what, they wrote for the scene. And so there's a lot of occasions where it's a real tightrope for the music editor to walk to try to kind of serve those 2 masters in pursuit of, a singular vision.
Where you get an annoying mixer who says, wait a minute, you guys, look what happens if you bring this piece of music just 4 seconds later. And everyone's like, yeah, that's a good, I like that. And then we turn to Chris and we go, Chris, but we like how it ends. So can you chop out 4 seconds and still make it sound musical and still make it work with the rest of the scene?
Yeah. I mean, there are a lot of masters.
You've got 10 minutes to do it. So
yeah, that's the other thing, especially on TV.
Because we hit overtime in 10 minutes.
Right, there you go.
Producers are coming in 30 minutes. We're going to play back the whole thing. So get it done now.
The cool thing for us too, I was going to add, the last thing was like the cool part about it too, especially on the film side, is we get a lot of time on the project. If they've done it right, we're basically there from the very earliest picture cuts all the way to the end. So you really get to know the project and the people you're working with, and like everyone else has said, you kind of form those relationships, and there's certain clients where you just kind of go in and know your process, and like it's the same composer, the same director, and everyone kind of knows their role and part, and you just make this whole machine go and make an awesome movie or TV show.
I'll just double with what Chris was saying about music editorial. I think goes overall for sound, and it's also something that I've told people for years, is that because so many viewers think when they're watching a show, whether it's on television, broadcast cable, or in the theater, they think because they're not exposed to what it is that we do professionally, that, oh, that's just how it sounded when they shot it. And and it was just all cut together, and nobody, because that's how it is on their cell phone, right? But the upside and the downside of what we all do as professionals in sound is that if we're really, really good at what we do, you will never know we were in the room.
Yeah, I think it's the invisible art, unless it's something extremely special and maybe unique. For instance, Gravity was a big first Atmos show, right? And you got the dialogue flying around the room, so most people are going to be aware of that. But Michael, I agree. I mean, generally, if the mix is I think more so than not, it's people notice it when it's done poorly, right?
Yeah.
If it's done really well, someone goes and they enjoy the movie, and that's kind of what we all strive for, is they don't notice it, because that means that the story is being told and they're completely into the story. They're not thinking about, that ADR line that pops out, or the bad music cut, or, any sort of potential problem on the mix.
We're evoking emotion without the audience realizing that they're being manipulated. If we're doing our job well, we're being subtle at it. So there you go.
I want to say too that Gary is the the common denominator between all of us, and so we all started as blank slates. We all do. It doesn't matter. Even Tiger Woods started as a blank slate at one point. And never picked up a golf club before. But the one thing that Gary's given all of us is he's definitely seen something in us that we might not necessarily see, and it took me a while to realize that and really appreciate it. I'm just thankful for his mentorship and friendship too. The long time ago that I graduated, and it's the fact that when he's out here, we get together, and when I'm back, I try to see him, and we, it's and all these guys too. We're colleagues and friends, and I'm grateful for all of it.
One additional bit, I think I learned this from Gary Reed, was always try to be the dumbest guy in the room. And that can be applied to life, not just audio. But surround yourself with people that are going to push you and make you better at whatever it is you're doing.
We've been listening to a group affectionately known as the MSU Audio Mafia, and I'm Russ White. This is MSU Today.